welcome back, delegates and alternates. My name is Devin Abalon, Region 10 nominating member, and you're watching part 2 of a 4-part video series designed to help prepare you for the executive and caucus sessions at CRC. Speaking of videos, if you want to learn more about a variety of different topics, such as base camp, I invite you to check out Beer with Buzz, a new video series put together by Buzz Wright. Isn't that right, Buzz? Do you think they know that I'm not really talking to Buzz? I'm actually just talking to a saguaro cactus. Okay, so in part 1, we talked about ASHRAE's organizational structure and your role as delegates and alternates at the CRC to represent the members of your chapter. In part 2, today, we're going to be talking about regional positions and how those regional positions are nominated and elected. So we've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. In this segment, we're going to be covering regional positions. Now, before we get into things, I do want to make one comment regarding the nominating process and timing. The caucus will be making recommendations at CRC for open positions for the following year. I know that may seem obvious, but I think it's worth pointing out, particularly for Regions 6, 8, and 11 who hold spring CRCs. They may have selected candidates in May of 2018, but those individuals would not actually take office until July of 2019. All right? So, we saw this regional organization structure in part 1. We're going to be focusing on the DRC, the RMCR, the ARC, the RBCs, and the nominating committee. The other positions are typically appointed by the DRC. The DRC is the leader of the region. He or she manages regional operations and represents the chapters and region at the board of directors. As a board member, the DRC will also have society-level responsibilities with various councils and committees. At a minimum, the DRC is expected to attend both the winter and annual conferences, board meetings, the regional planning meeting and president-elect training, the CRC, and also conduct chapter visits. They're also expected to participate in a number of conference calls throughout the year. DRCs must hold a grade of capital M member for a minimum of 5 years prior to election and shall have previously served as a chapter president and/or a regional vice chair. The DRC position is a 3-year term, as you can see here. So we only have to elect a new DRC every 3 years. In this example, for Region 10, for instance, Meritus's term runs from 2017 to 2020, which means that we will be discussing her replacement, the new DRC, at the 2019 CRC in San Diego, which you should all go to because San Diego is awesome. I do want to point out that people often have questions about qualification requirements for the different positions. Because DRC is a board-level position, this can be found in the Nominating Committee Manual of Procedures Reference Manual, which is on the ASHRAE website. So, how is a DRC elected? Well, the chapter's regional committee, that's you, will meet in executive session at CRC to discuss various candidates. The top 3 candidates in priority order are then forwarded to ASHRAE staff, who will then confirm the candidates' qualifications and their willingness to serve. The names are then brought forth to the Society Nominating Committee, or SNC, for discussion at the Fall Nominating Committee meeting. The SNC will then vote on DRCs at the winter conference, and one name will be put on the ballot. Members vote at the annual conference, at the Sunday morning meeting. Results are announced at the Monday morning board meeting, and the new DRCs are installed at the President's Lunch later that day. This all takes place again at the annual conference, which typically takes place at the end of June. All right? So that's the DRC. Let's move on to the next position, and that is the Regional Members Council Representative, or RMCR. As we recall from part 1, ASHRAE has 3 councils: Members Council, Tech Council, and Pub Ed. As the name implies, the RMCR is the regional representative on Members Council. Pretty straightforward. One of the RMCR's primary tasks is to bring forward any regional motions from the CRC and to communicate back to the region the outcome of these motions. Additionally, the RMCR has additional responsibilities as a member of one of the 2 Members Council subcommittees. At a minimum, the RMCR is expected to attend the winter and annual conferences, the Fall Members Council meeting, the regional planning meeting and president-elect training, CRC, and also conduct chapter visits. To serve as an RMCR, the candidate must hold a grade of capital M member for a minimum of 3 years prior to election. The nominating process for RMCR is a bit different. Like DRC, RMCR is a 3-year term. The CRC will select 3 candidates in priority order and forward this list to the DRC. The DRC will then review the list and forward it to ASHRAE staff and the council and the chair of members council. So ASHRAE staff and the chair of members council. ASHRAE will confirm qualifications and willingness to serve, and members council chair will forward one name to the board of directors for approval at the winter conference. So that is the RMCR. It should be noted that while not presumed, many regions do use the RMCR position to prepare a candidate as a future DRC. Other regions have had the outgoing DRC serve as an RMCR. This shouldn't limit your discussions, but it is something that should be kept in mind as you nominate your RMCR. All right, moving on to ARC, or Assistant Regional Chair. The Assistant Regional Chair, or ARC, is an optional position that has historically been used to help support the DRC. Some regions have the RMCR also serve as the ARC, while other regions may have the outgoing DRC serve as the ARC during the DRC's first year. The ARC can fill in at the Board of Directors meetings if the DRC is not available to attend. To serve as an ARC, the candidate must hold a grade of member, capital M, for at least 3 years prior to election. Because this is an optional position, the nomination process is pretty simple. The CRC selects 3 candidates in priority order and forwards the name to the DRC, who then selects a single candidate. In the past, this has required Society President-elect approval, but this approval is no longer required. Okay, so moving on to the regional vice chairs. In part 1, we talked about the 6 RVC positions. That's right, 6, because until recently, we only had 5. Now, with YEA, we had the YEA Regional Coordinator, or YRC, but now with its inclusion as a grassroots committee, the YEA committee now has an official RVC position. Now, unlike the RMCR position or the DRC position that are 3-year terms, the RVC positions are technically only 1-year terms that can be renewed for a total of 3 years. And that's why you see in this graphic here, 3-year terms listed. You'll note that for Region 10, our Government Affairs RVC, the fantastic Dave Paulty, his term expires in 2019, which means that we will need to nominate his replacement at the upcoming 2018 CRC. For the positions that are not expiring in 2019, we normally carry the current RVC as the first choice and then have second and third choices. It's important to try to have 3 choices for each position in the event that an RVC is unable to complete his or her term. So, the roles and responsibilities for each RVC does vary based on the committee that they're serving on. I encourage you to refer to the Region Operations Manual, the Rule of the Board, and each committee's Manual of Procedures, or MOP, for detailed descriptions. Generally speaking, the RVC directs the committee operations for the region. In this example, Elise Falconer, our YEA RVC, coordinates the YEA efforts in the region and supports the YEA chairs. The RVCs also work on various subcommittees at their respective society-level committee. This is very important to note. I think that many times people think of RVCs as just doing the work within the region, but that's really only about half of their responsibilities. The other half involves working on the society committee, attending meetings, and participating in conference calls throughout the year. At a minimum, RVCs are expected to attend both the winter and annual conferences, the regional planning meeting and president-elect training, and the CRC. They're also expected to make chapter visits to help support the various chairs within each of the chapters. Some committees also hold additional training events that may require travel. Membership promotion, research promotion, and student activities, all have centralized training events. And YEA holds Leadership Weekend, International Leadership Weekend, and Leadership Weekend 2.0. I emphasize this because I think it's critical that as we consider candidates for these positions, there's a clear understanding of the time commitment involved. I think we do a disservice to both the volunteer members and ASHRAE as a whole when we don't effectively communicate those expectations to the potential candidates. In order to serve as an RVC, the candidate must hold a member grade, capital M again, for a minimum of 3 years prior to election. This requirement does not apply to YEA RVCs. Now, let's look at how RVCs are nominated. At the CRC, you will be selecting 3 candidates for each RVC position, with an emphasis on the positions entering the third 1-year term, so the expiring positions. The DRC and the outgoing RBC, if applicable, will review the list and forward a single candidate to the Society President-elect for approval. As always, Society staff will confirm qualifications and willingness to serve, and the Society President-elect will send confirming appointment letters out, usually in November, but sometimes even after the winter conference. A candidate's appointment is not official until this is done. Now, I bring this up as a reminder of the confidentiality agreement that we talked about in part 1, the confidentiality agreement that you will all be signing. I know it may be difficult. You've asked a candidate in your chapter if they're willing to serve. You've made an impassioned presentation on the qualifications and virtues of this worthy individual to your fellow delegates and alternates. They are unanimously voted in by the caucus and positioned to be the new RVC. And you can't say a single word to them. Remember, what is discussed in executive session is 100% confidential and cannot be disclosed to anyone at any time. It's not your responsibility nor your right to let a candidate know whether or not they were voted in. I know it's tempting, but let the process work itself out. They will receive news from the president-elect when the time is right. So you cannot let the candidate know the outcome of the caucus. But please make sure that they understand the process so they're not strung out wondering what's going on. All right, so I'll get off my soapbox for now as we go on to the next section of this video, and that is the illustrious nominating committee. The regional nominating committee consists of the nominating member and alternate, and the reserve alternate who would step in the event that either the member or alternate was unavailable. You can see for this Region 10 example that the years of service are listed below each name. That is there because there are term limits for the nominating committee members. This was a recent change. This is a one-year term, but a person can serve as a regional member for a total of 6 years and also serve as an alternate for a total of 6 years. The nominating committee facilitates the caucus and executive sessions at CRC and supports the delegates, alternates, and chapter nominating committee members. At a minimum, the member and alternate are required to attend both the winter and annual conferences, the fall nominating committee meeting, president-elect training and the regional planning meeting, and of course, the CRC. To serve on the nominating committee, the candidate must hold a capital M member grade for at least 5 years prior to election. It's also ideal to have candidates who have considerable experience at the regional and or society levels of ASHRAE. That's because we discuss not only candidates from our own region, but candidates from society as a whole. So having that wide familiarity with different members is very helpful. So who elects the regional nominating committee? You do. That's right, just you. This does not go to the DRC or members council or the board or the president-elect. You alone will select your nominating representatives as your voice to society. I know that there have been a lot of conversations recently about how members feel like they have no say in how our society leaders are elected, but that is not true. You and your members definitely have a voice. You elect your nominating committee, and you bring forth your candidates at CRC. It is the responsibility of the regional nominating committee to honor your wishes and present your candidates to the society nominating committee. Okay? So, off one soapbox and on to another. Anyway, so what is your primary responsibility right here, right now? And if Van Halen is playing in your head right now, you are welcome. You want to work with your chapter board and members to identify potential candidates from your chapter. You can look at past presidents, past or current RVCs, past or current committee chairs, and other chapter members who are active in ASHRAE. I'll remind you of ASHRAE's fundamental nominating tenet that the office shall seek the person rather than the person seek the office. It is your responsibility as chapter leaders to seek out those individuals whom you feel would do a good job at each office. Once you've identified candidates, talk to them. I know I mentioned in previous slides that ASHRAE staff would confirm a candidate's willingness to serve, but please do not forward any names for consideration until you've already talked to them and they have confirmed their willingness to serve. Review their ASHRAE bios and make sure that they meet the minimum qualifications for positions. If you don't know how to access member bios, just ask. Your nominating committee is here to support you. Now, the next one is key. Make sure that they understand the time and financial commitments of the position. I alluded to this earlier. We need to be very upfront with candidates so they know what they're getting into. Review the rules of the board, the region operations manual, the specific committee's MOP, and the region transportation policy. We've gone through a number of slides that outline the expectation of these positions, and they all require attendance at a series of conferences and meetings. There can be a significant time commitment, but there can also be a significant financial commitment. For a majority of these required meetings, travel costs are covered by society. That's basically airfare. But what about everything else? Hotel costs, meals, conference registration, parking, etc. Who covers these costs? In some cases, the region may cover some or all of these costs. In other cases, these costs must be borne by the volunteer member themselves or their employer. It's critical that potential candidates understand the region's transportation policy and know what is covered before they commit to serving the region. Next, find out what their interests are. Maybe you have an individual who's passionate about YEA or membership. Maybe you have someone who's really interested in programs or CTTC. Or maybe you just have someone who's interested in contributing in any capacity deemed appropriate. Find out. And don't limit yourself to people who've held similar positions in the past. Just because someone has never served as chapter research promotion chair doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't make a fantastic RP/RVC. Look at the characteristics and leaderships of an individual. Don't focus on past experience. Next, understand the schedule and make sure your candidate understands it as well. You may approach a person and find out that they're willing to serve and would be really interested in student activities. Well, if the new student activities RVC just rolled on, it may be 2 to 3 years before there's an opening for them. This may cause them to get discouraged and their initial enthusiasm may wane. Make sure to keep them up to date on what positions are opening up. Finally, come to CRC prepared to present your candidates. As the representative for your chapter, it is your job to sell the rest of the committee on your candidate, so be prepared. All right, well, that's all we have for this video, where we covered a lot of different topics relating to regional positions. In our next video, part 3, we're going to be covering society-level positions. So make sure you check that one out. Thank you very much for watching, and until then, be a hero. What do you guys think? Is it hot? Do you want to miss the Tucson CRC? That's what I thought.